And
Nice.
as an organization, we're destined to be the forefront of innovation and enablement around responsible AI use to ultimately drive impact, not only for our staff, but within our local communities that we serve. And with that, my name is Kevin Belcher. I have been a data analyst with Child Action for over a year now.
My name is
And
Haminder Kaur. I'm our senior programmer analyst, and I've been here a little over 3 years.
nice. So going into our little agenda today, it's going to be broken up into two parts, where the first section is we're going to take you through how Child Action has been enabling and empowering staff through Enable AI enablement work group journey. And then in the next section, Harminder will dive a little bit deeper into how Child Action has been in the process of building more and develop more AI solutions for both staff and families from an agentic lens. So kind of a both of a present and future perspective of how Child Action is seeing AI in action. So going to our main mission with our enablement work group, Harminder and I have been conducting for about over 4 months now and is still ongoing. But essentially, it is to empower staff to responsibly adopt AI, enhance decision making, and drive meaningful impact across the organization. It's been super rewarding for seeing some of the excitement and eagerness from staff to learn AI and to help drive more impact in their daily work. And then this comes to a quote that I like by JFK, that change is the law of life, and those who look only to the past or present are certain to miss the future. This quote really resonates with me and how I've grown as a person throughout life. And one of the best pieces of advice I've ever gotten is learning to embrace being comfortable with being uncomfortable. And we think that idea really fits perfectly into how we structured this work group to ultimately drive our ultimate mission of making staff more equipped with responsible use of AI. So with that, after our mission, obviously we have to start somewhere. Once we got leadership buy-in to move forward with this technology shift, we wanted to take Child Action along a journey, and that journey has to start somewhere. So forming a foundation is kind of where we're starting at. When you're building a house, you don't really start with building the roof and then building walls and windows and even, God forbid, furnishing the place. That wouldn't really make sense. You have to start with that foundation and then move up from there. So where that really aligns with our enablement work group is starting to understand and know your audience. So we need to gauge that landscape of our organization to identify everyone's experience level and their sentiment around AI. So even before starting the work group, we sent out a survey to gauge that sentiment. And about 50% of surveyors said that they don't use AI at all. We received responses like they don't know where to start, unsure of what tools are officially permitted, fear of job replacement, apprehension to unfamiliar technology, and uncertainty around what data AI can collect from users. So that takes us to our next step in our journey, which is thinking of it from like a teaching perspective. You're not going to have first, third, and fifth graders in a math class learn pre-algebra or learn the same concepts. That wouldn't really make sense. So we had to start small, scale up. And what that means kind of more in detail is we first had to obviously define what AI is, provide some clarity and kind of bridge that gap of not understanding necessarily of just the strengths of AI, but also what are the weaknesses and what are those potential risks. So going kind of hand in hand with defining AI is being able to visualize how, AI is really no different than past technology shifts. So we kind of thought that, comparing AI to previous revolutions, whether it's industrial, agricultural, the dot-com bubble, the evolution of landlines to mobile phones to smartphones, all of those at one point were brand new, and it was, scary for people to kind of on board with those new technologies. So AI is really no different. We all ultimately were able to perceive or persevere through those different times. And now we don't even think twice about, flying an airplane, driving a car, going onto the internet. It's essentially second nature to us now. So then lastly, in that start small and scale up step is we need to bust some of those misconceptions and worries about AI. So kind of going back to those sentiment comments in the pre-work group survey, we needed to put ourselves in the shoes of our staff. We needed to empathize with them. We needed to understand their perspective of being able to provide that confidence that their skill sets and abilities are still critical in leveraging AI. So we'll kind of get into that in the next slide. But essentially that's kind of what we see in the start small and scaling up step. So, and then from there, moving on to step 3, we needed to surface those pain points from child action staff. So some of those misconceptions, kind of like what we're going to talk about further, but also looking at, those day-to-day tasks that staff are finding inefficiencies in, that we can, provide a tool set for them to improve their workflows. So some of these use cases that have been brought up are email drafting, summarization, PowerPoint and document creation, faster lookups and how-tos, quick ad hoc analysis and chart building, and even translation, which is, a huge component in our childcare agency. So once we kind of understand, who our audience is, we defined AI, uncovered some of those myths and pain points, then we kind of bring them kind of further along in the journey of actually building that confidence by providing, actual demos with specifically Copilot, since everyone at Child Action has license access of Copilot through Microsoft 365 Suite. So in practice, we would show examples of how to use Outlook to summarize emails, building priority schedules based on, the prior week, based on your inbox, creating automatic rules, building charts and analysis through Excel or Word, including branding and color and style to certain documents, and even as well as customizing, your AI responses based on staff's intentions, their specific use cases. And then lastly, like we also introduced the idea of prompt engineering to staff, and that really resonated with them, to essentially give them some tips and tricks for them to start using today, moving forward, for them not only to leverage AI, but to be more efficient in their process of leveraging AI. So, and then, I think through the first 3 steps is, the bulk of our first sessions that we had. And then the 4th one is our demo session. So after each of these sessions, we would also send surveys out to kind of gauge, what staff are currently struggling with, what they still hope AI can help with, and even, brainstorming new ideas of what AI can help with. So that is forming a foundation. Now, going a little bit deeper into uncovering those misconceptions around AI, I think one idea that really resonated with staff through our surveys was this idea of thinking of AI as an assistant. So even though AI like literally stands for artificial intelligence, we should really start tricking our mind and thinking that AI stands for the assistant to your intelligence. It's only as good as what you're going to tell it to do. essentially giving you, the user, the ultimate power of the final output, of the final say at the end of the day. So, and I think with that, like whatever role you are in, I mean, I can make us all bet that most of our day-to-day workflows has an area of recurring or manual intervention, as well as areas that have more thoughtful and higher capacity tasks. So that's where we introduce this idea of AI empowers. It doesn't replace. Again, it reduces repetitive work, allowing staff to focus on solving those more complex and meaningful tasks. And then moving on to the next one. So kind of distinguishing between human, augmented, and automated tasks. I think part of the misconceptions around AI, seeing some of those pain points from the org, is this assumption that AI can fully automate part of our roles or in the near future. However, part of that defining AI, like I said, is understanding not only its strengths, but understanding those weaknesses. Um, those weaknesses are really centered around the lack of contextual domain business knowledge. So that's where the human in the loop comes into play. And it really, most of the use cases in childcare agency and in the industry as well, really falls into that, middle ground augmented bucket where, sometimes it's 50% human, 50% AI, maybe it's 30-70. But essentially, like, human is still very critical in the entire scope of being able to leverage AI. So then that leads to the next one. I mean, all these, buzzwords and phrases are great, but I don't think any of it is really possible until you have a shift in mindset. So developing that mindset of curiosity, iteration, continuous learning really builds a resilience in the evolving AI landscape. And it kind of goes back to the idea of being comfortable with being uncomfortable. We as humans don't really grow much without some form of trial and error, without the eager and willingness to take on risks, and really get your hands dirty with new technologies. So I think that's where this mind shift is very critical, um, for everyone to kind of understand how to better leverage AI. And then another thing is kind of, which resonated with staff a lot, was again drawing those parallels with different technology shifts that we have seen in the past. So, like I said, it's no different from the Industrial Revolution. AI really changes work roles instead of eliminating. Um, I imagine being a fiscal or finance role and having to calculate, current year revenue without a calculator. Like that would be pretty crazy. So that idea also resonated a lot with staff. Really, really understanding, those comparisons of us being able to persevere in the past. And so as we kind of went further into that journey with Child Action with our AI enablement work group, part of being comfortable with AI is, like I said, understanding the weaknesses and pitfalls. So we wanted to navigate those weaknesses in practice with the end user. And that's where prompt engineering really comes into play. We wanted to provide tips that immediately they can start using, practicing, and exploring to figure out what the best, way that they can leverage AI in their specific role and their specific work. So, quickly, it's like some of these tips, like how I like to utilize in my work is the 5 Ws and 1 H framework. So when you're going along through prompting, are you able to answer as many of these who, what, when, where, why, how type of questions? Who could be like, who's the audience for if you're trying to draft an email or trying to summarize an email to send to a client or family. Obviously, AI needs to know what that tone is, what the audience is, what's the purpose of your use case, where you're trying to get at, how do you want the output to look like, what's the necessity, why are you doing are asking this use case? Those types of questions, I think, really helps with providing as much context as possible that AI can give you the best result. And then using role-based thinking, asking for step-by-step instructions for how to use cases, organizing and labeling conversations to keep context and conversation memory aligned to that specific use case or that conversation, avoiding the use of contradictory or ambiguous language that may confuse the AI, and then even asking AI to critique itself, validate its responses, ask for links, ask for sources. You can also ask for next steps. Another one that I apply like every single day that I'm using AI in my analyst role is including screenshots when applicable. AI has been really good at being able to identify, what you're trying to get at with certain screenshots. So, more like custom instructions under the settings menu to customize how AI responds to you, defining constraints, telling AI what it should not generate, can also be impactful. Having prompt templates that you just need to change certain placeholders if you have a certain use case that you're going to use repeatedly. It could be an easy copy and paste, and then, like I said, change whatever placeholders you need, and it makes your work a lot more fast. And then having patience through iteration, trying other AI models. Those all those tips are very helpful for anyone wanting to leverage AI. And then as we got to our demo sessions in our work group, and I mean, quick disclaimer, it could be hard sometimes to get, forcing staff to take surveys could be like, forcing a 10-year-old to eat vegetables. But even though, some of these numbers, may not reflect necessarily how many people attended our sessions, it still gives us kind of a good baseline of, some of these tips that they're starting to utilize, what use cases, what applications under Copilot they're really starting to leverage AI for. So, some of these things that we're seeing, top 3 AI use cases: writing and editing, email drafting management, project planning and organization. Some of the top prompt engineering tips that we're noticing from staff is being specific about those goals, specifying rule, tone, context as much as possible, going through those 5 W's and 1H framework for answering the who, the what, the where, the why. And then we have some not yet using or NA, which is totally fine. I mean, obviously we all kind of start at a certain place with AI, and that's the beauty of being able to iterate even your workflows of leveraging AI and improving it. So, and then some of the, most applications that we're seeing, high usage on from our work group is Outlook and Copilot, Word, Excel and Copilot, even using the desktop or the web app. Those are getting, high usage, and it's very, very cool to see. And then lastly, this, to kind of piggyback off the last slide as well, this really illustrates that growing confidence from staff using Copilot more responsibly. As you can see, we hosted our in-person work group demo session on June 10th. And prior to that, we would get about 10 to 15-ish daily active users using Copilot. But once we fed all of those tips, once we, showed that interactiveness with, leveraging AI and showcasing them and providing that confidence, then we saw a huge surge in usage. So now we're getting, 30 plus, even close to 40 daily active users and using Copilot. And, this is obviously just the beginning. I think we're going to continue to see that growth play out as these models continue to improve. So I think when you pair confidence and direction from leadership along with, an interactive enablement work group, then you truly see the impact of those two components together can have with staff, especially when they're super eager to make their work more efficient, and are encouraged to develop that overall theme of shifting the mindset, and that desire to continue learning and growth. So this is obviously, this growth that we're seeing is just setting the stage for what's to come in the future at Child Action, as business processes and workflows continue to improve. And again, this wraps, back around to our first mission slide, which is to improve the way we serve children and families in our communities, as well as serving as many people in need as possible. So yeah, with that, I will kick it off to Harminder for the next section of our presentation.
Thank you, Kevin. All right, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay. So what you're seeing on the screen now is just our UI modernization of the SC78 system. So as you can see on the top, so the top two screenshots that you're seeing are obviously the older system, and the two on the bottom are the newer system. So this is all just part of our digital transformation at Child Action. One of the things we're looking to do is to modernize our old applications, our old systems. And so for this one, we just decided to kind of give it a facelift, update the UI on the front end. And so this was done with ChatGPT. All we really had to do for this one was put in our brand colors and put in some screenshots of some newer login screens and ask it to give us something similar to that. And then when we got something that we liked, what we did is we started putting in chunks of code into ChatGPT and having it modernize the UI for us that way. And it was able to develop some templates for us for our forms, for our menus, our headers and footers, in order to keep everything consistent throughout the whole application. So I think this is one of the smaller applications. It was maybe like 10 or 15 ASPX pages. And so because it was smaller, it was a little bit easier to work with. And what we had to do was create a template for us that we can use throughout every page, every screen that you see. So for example, this one, as you can see, it's got some purple tables with a blue background. And then on other pages, we would have like blue tables with a white background. And so there was just a lot of inconsistency. And so with the use of ChatGPT, we were able to create those templates in order to keep it consistent throughout the application. So every screen you see will look similar. And so the way that we had done this was, as I said, we took kind of chunks of code, put it into ChatGPT and had it work with those different sections of the application. And at first, I think there was a little bit hesitance of, adding our code into an AI tool. But the more comfortable we got with it, we would then just put in an entire page of code and have it work all together. Because when you're putting in just sections of code, sometimes the results you'll get are a little bit inconsistent with what you're looking for. And so it was easier to just put in the entire page and be like, okay, work with this page at a time and update the front end for us. And so that worked a lot better. If we were doing this again today, I would recommend using something like Claude Cowork or Codex and just giving it your entire project at once and having it updated that way. And so if you're, again, a little bit hesitant, what you can do is just, create a copy or a backup of the project and have it work with that. And so when you use a tool such as Claude Cowork, you can give it access to just view your project, or you can give it access to actually edit the files itself. And so that is a lot easier than the way we did it, because you can kind of just have it running in the background and go work on something else while it takes care of every single screen for you. And with Claude, what you can do is you can add a claude.md file, so the markdown file with specific instructions of what you want it to do and what you don't want it to do. And it's actually able to recognize that that file is meant for its consumption, it knows that the file is going to have instructions specifically for it to run or read before it actually does anything with your code. So it's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the next thing we're going to take a look at is our first agent at Child Action. So our use case for this is just, am I eligible for subsidized childcare? So we took the simplest use case that we could find just for our first agent to try and, test it out. And so with this use case, it's currently living on our website in the form of 4 questions. It's going to be, do you live in Sacramento? Or are you looking for care in Sacramento? What's your household size? What's your income? And are you receiving cash aid? And so based on those 4 answers that you give, it'll give one of these 4 results. So now I'm just going to go ahead and show you how that was built. So we built this in Salesforce's Agentforce Builder. Since we have access to Salesforce, this is how we've decided to do this. So on the left-hand side under agent definition, you'll see what says system settings. This is where we just added some general instructions for the agent that it's going to remember throughout the whole, throughout the whole chat process. And so we just said you are empathetic. We said that you must detect the language of the user on their very first message and respond to them natively in their language. And this was important to us because a lot of our clients speak different languages. And so having that translation layer built in here was very important to us. And Salesforce offers, I think, about 10 different languages, but that didn't quite meet our needs. So instead, we hooked this up with Azure Translation Layer, which offers more than 135 different languages. So over here, you're just seeing our welcome message. Just simple, hi, I'm an AI assistant. Ask me about childcare subsidy eligibility in any language. And then a generic error message that we wanted to pop out. But what we want to look at now is just our sub-agents. So we have 3 sub-agents here, the topic selector, the escalation, and check subsidy eligibility. So the first thing it's going to look at is topic selector. And this is where it's going to determine where it wants to route you. So we have 2 different routes set up here. One is to check subsidy eligibility, and one is for escalation. Escalation is going to be if they want to speak to a human or a representative. So when the agent comes into here, it'll analyze what the input is from the user, and it'll determine if it needs to go to check subsidy eligibility or go to escalation. So if we take a look at check subsidy eligibility, this is the top part is just where you kind of add in the instructions for the agent. So it knows what to do. This is where we added all those quiz questions in. And so if they answer yes, respond this way. If they answer no, respond this way. And so down here is where we have our actions. So if it needs to perform any actions, it should be able to recognize that. So one of them is calculate subsidy eligibility. And so here there's going to be 2 inputs that it's going to take from the user, which is the household size and their income. And then it will go into the flow and take a look at what the max income limit is going to be for that household size. And then it'll determine if it's eligible or not. So those are the 4 variables we have here. So I'm just going to go ahead and open that flow for us. I think I do have it open. Yeah. So in this flow chart, we can see it's going to get the income limit. So these are values that we've inputted into our data cloud. And the way that we did that is we had an Excel sheet with the household sizes and income limits for those household sizes. We input that into the data stream, and those numbers, those data points get ingested by the system, and then they're saved to a data lake object called income threshold. So in this flow, we're just having this section right here where it says get income limit. It's going to read those values from that data lake object. And so from there, it's going to compare the user's household size to the household sizes in those values. And then from there, it'll see what the income limit is for that household size. And then when it comes down here, it's going to compare user's income to that limit. And if it's above or below, it'll determine if you're going to be eligible or not eligible. So then when we come back here, Under the calculate eligibility, there's two other flows that those are just to translate. So one is going to be translate what the user is saying to English, do what you need to do, go through the process, the instructions, the flows, and then the other flow is going to be to translate it back, whatever response you want to give to that user's language. And the last one is just for our survey that we've had set up, which I will show you as well. So one thing I want to point out is that when we were coming up with these instructions, a lot of what we were doing, again, was just kind of going into Claude and asking it to come up with instructions for a Salesforce agent. This is what we wanted to do. And it would give us some outputs and we would put it in here. And sometimes if we wanted to create the survey or do this or that, Salesforce can be very involved, so sometimes it's a little bit hard to find where you want to go next. And so Claude would be like, okay, go here, click this, click this. And I'm like, well, I don't see that on screen. And so again, as Kevin mentioned, I always take a screenshot and put it into Claude. But one thing that Claude actually recommended to me was to download the Claude extension for Google Chrome. So when I did that, it pops up right here in the browser. So the one you're seeing here on the left-hand side says Agentforce. This is the Salesforce chat. I can chat back and forth with the agent and ask questions about my agent, about how I can get it to perform better, maybe, you know, update the instructions. How do I do that? I found Claude a little bit more useful for that. So when I downloaded the extension, here I can just type in whatever I want about my agent to Claude. And because it's the browser extension, it's able to see my browser. And so now it can see exactly what I'm seeing. And if I change this to act without asking, it can actually make updates and changes for me. It can click around, you know, just like I could. So it can do that for you. And to be honest, I do think the Claude one was a little bit more useful for that. I'm just gonna exit right now. So next we have the escalation sub-agent. And so here again, we just give it the instructions. If a user asks to talk to a human or if they're asking for a representative, it'll go ahead and follow this flow called create support case, where it'll take a description of what the user needs help with, their email, their name, and then it'll send an email to us letting us know that a support case was created for this user. So let's go ahead and preview this and see in action. So the preview button is how we are testing this within Salesforce, within the agent. So I'm going to go ahead and reset this. Okay, so it's saying, let's chat. Hi, I'm an AI assistant. Ask me about childcare subsidy eligibility in any language. So I'm going to say, hi, am I eligible for childcare? Okay, and so when we're debugging it within the Salesforce system, what's really nice is that it shows us right here in the middle exactly what it's thinking and it's exactly what it's doing. So the first thing it did, it transitioned to the check subsidy eligibility sub-agent, which is what we want. And so here it tells us what it did. User asked if they're eligible for childcare. The agent routed from topic selector to the check subsidy eligibility sub-agent, began the mandated quiz, asking whether they live in Sacramento. So if I get a result that doesn't look right or I want more information about it, if I click right here, it says Ask Agentforce. It can take that output from the agent, adds it right here as an attachment, and then I can chat with the Agentforce agent about why did I get this result, or I want more information about this. So that's one really cool thing about it. So it's saying, do you live in Sacramento County or are you seeking childcare? I'm going to go ahead and say yes. Then again, it'll tell us what its reasoning is, what it's doing, what it's thinking. So it went ahead to the next question. It says, great, there's hundreds of licensed providers in Sacramento. Now let's check if you're eligible for financial assistance. How many people are in your household? So I will say 3. So it's thinking. It says, what is your family's gross monthly income? I'll say 1,200. And then it says, are you currently receiving cash aid? I'm going to say no. So now it gives us our result. It says, based on the information you provided, you may be eligible for subsidized childcare in Sacramento. If you'd like to continue, I can help connect you. So the way that it came to this result, as we know on the back end, it went through that flow. It took our values that we inputted, it compared it to the values that we have in our data lake object, and it's able to give us the result that we're looking for. So I'm going to say next. I'd like to speak to a live agent. So now let's see if it will route us to the escalation subagent. So here it says transition to subagent escalation. So that's what we're looking for. And it's saying I can submit a support inquiry on your behalf and our team will get back to you as soon as possible. Would you like me to do that? I'll say yes. It says I'll connect you to a live agent who can assist you. Please wait while I transfer your request. Okay, so let's see why it said that. User replied yes to the agent's submit inquiry. Agent now in the topic selector will escalate with escalation routing available, generated a confirmation style message, and ask them to wait. Okay. So I don't see it doing anything else. So let's ask, can you create my support ticket? Create your support ticket. I need your full name. Can you provide your full name? Okay. And the next thing it should ask is email address. Okay. Your inquiry has been successfully submitted and our team will get back to you as soon as possible. So right now, I just got the email. Since we're still in the testing phase, the emails are just being sent directly to me and our team. But this is, like our first version, our first draft of what it would look like. So it says a new support inquiry has been submitted. Please review for follow-up. It gave the name that I gave, the email that I gave, and it's just saying user would like to speak to a live agent about childcare subsidy eligibility. Okay, so the next thing we can look at is how the translation works. So right now I was speaking to it in English. So I'm going to go ahead and say thank you in Spanish, and let's see if it will recognize that and if it will respond back in Spanish. Okay, so it says you're welcome. My Spanish is not that great, but I was saying, is there anything else I can help you with today? So it's able to go back and forth between languages depending on how you are, whatever you're inputting, whatever you're asking it. So just going to go ahead and get Claude added here. Okay, so when we are debugging it, this is obviously on our end. We actually have it deployed live for our staff right now to be testing it. And so this is deployed on a copied page of one of our websites. This is just internal for our staff. And this is the page that we'd like for it to be on. So it's the page that parents will go on when they come to our website. And so they're the ones who are going to be checking to see if they're eligible, right? So here it kind of pops up in the bottom right-hand corner. Same thing, it says, hi, I'm an AI assistant. Can you help me ask me about childcare subsidy eligibility? So if I prompt it here, I'll say, am I eligible? And then it should give, similar responses that we've seen before. Oh, it ended the chat earlier. Okay, let's try it again. Am I eligible? Okay, so again, it started asking the same questions. That's what we're looking for. So let's just say I went through all the questions. I'm done. I got all the information that I wanted. So now I'm going to say, thank you for your help. And it should recognize that I want to end the chat, but let's see what it says. Perfect. So it's saying you're welcome. If you have more questions in the future, feel free to reach out. Have a great day. And then it gives us a survey that we set up on the Salesforce end. So if I go ahead and click that, it'll take us to a survey. Right now, it's just simple 2 questions. How's your experience? And then anything you want us to know. Okay. So if I submit that, that's on the user end. And now if we go back here, we will see in Salesforce Survey Builder on our end, we can see the results from that. And so this was a survey we set up. And if you go to analyze, we'll see those results right here. We have 14 total surveys completed right now, and then we can see everything that we're getting back. So that is really cool. And the next really cool thing is because we have our staff testing it right now, they are sharing any issues that they're having with it. And the really cool thing is that when we go into Agentforce Studio and we go into sessions and intent, we can actually see every single session that they're having. And so we'll see what the user inputted and what the output was that they got. We'll see it in almost in real time. I think it might take, like a day for it to process, but here, this one was in Spanish. So as you can see, their first input was just hola, and the agent was able to recognize that and responds back in Spanish. And again, it's following the same exact script that we wanted earlier, all those questions, and it tells you, you may be eligible. So if we click on any one of these outputs that the agent gives us, again, it'll show exactly what the agent's thinking was, where it routed them, why it routed them, and that's for every single one of the outputs. And then down here, it also tells you how long the agent took to think and how quickly it responded. And so again, for debugging purposes, this is actually really helpful. And then if I click the next one, it'll show the next session. Okay, and then every other session that our users are having. So that's kind of how our first agent is working. Again, we are still in testing for this, and we tried to use the simplest use case that we could think of, just so we can kind of get this up and running. Then we can analyze what the cost metrics were for it, what the success rate is, and then that can help us determine, for our future agents, what we want to do. And okay, so with our agent, the next things that we're looking at is to have it chat with a live agent. So right now, for escalating purposes, we're just having it send out an email. But in the future, we want to look at having them chat directly with a staff member. And so one way to do that, we can input our work hours for child action. So it'll recognize if it's during work hours or after work hours. We can input our staff schedule, so it'll know what staff is working at that time. And then we'll input in our staff's languages so that it'll know the users asking in Spanish. Let me see which staff members also speak Spanish who are currently working. And then it'll be able to route directly to that staff member. And then through Salesforce Omnichannel, the staff member will be able to chat directly with the user for any issues they may be having. And then another thing we're looking at is getting the agent to detect the browser language. So people who speak other languages, they might have their web browser set in a different language. So we should be able, through Salesforce, to be able to detect that and check what language it's set in. And then we can have the agent open up in that language with a welcome message. And then you already saw how our survey is working. We're still working on updating that as well as that email escalation that we showed you. And then lastly, just unit testing. So currently, when we're testing, we might type out a conversation every time. But once we get our unit testing in place and we have a new version of our agent ready, we can just have it set up with the unit testing. So it'll run those unit tests and we'll get all that analytics back that we're looking for. And so this is just our first agent that we created in Salesforce's environment, but really any AI tool that you use will have similar setup. So it might not be exactly the same, but the ability to chat, the ability to have a survey, to escalate, all of those same things will be available in other AI tools as well. So on that note, other than agents, let's look at what's next for Child Action. So as Kevin was explaining with our AI enablement work group, the next sessions we're looking to have are for staff to demo what they've been doing with AI. So we're inviting them to kind of showcase what they've used AI for, and we're inviting them to bring any use cases they might have that they would like to collaborate on. And we really want to foster that collaborative environment because every staff member's workflows and their departmental needs are going to be different. And so we're kind of trying to group them by department so they can work together on any use cases they have that might be similar. And then during the work group, something that did come up was governance. And so we're looking at implementing stronger governance as well. So we want to make sure that we are keeping up with what AI tools our staff is using and what AI tools they have a license for and they are allowed to use for each staff member or each department. And then at the same time, just kind of setting some guardrails for the use of AI. So one of the things that came up was if I'm using our branding or if I use something with our logo in it or our colors for branding, if I put that into an AI tool and it generates an image for me, those colors can be a little distorted. The image, the logo can end up a little distorted, right? And so one thing that we set up in place was if we're using Claude, it will pop up with a disclaimer saying that if you are looking to use this image for distribution purposes, it needs to be approved by the comms team first. And we've already verbally let our staff know that, but this is just one extra layer of protection where it pops up with a disclaimer on Claude. So they'll know to go and run that through comms before they use it for any, for any type of external distribution. And that's important because one thing that we always tell all of our staff is to review everything for accuracy, but sometimes little things can be missed here and there. So, having an extra set of eyes always helps for that. And then for improving the family experience, as you've seen with our first chatbot, we are looking to deploy AI-powered chat and self-service tools for our families and our clients so they can answer some common questions, get help with their applications, and reduce their wait times on their own without staff assistance. And so that saves time for our staff members as well so they can, continue their work on other things. And having those available in multiple languages, again, is very important for us because of our, diverse clientele. And then on the staff end, we're using AI assistants to summarize their case notes, draft communications, and automate any repetitive tasks. In regards to our overall digital transformation, the IT and data teams are looking to use AI for documentation purposes, not only to document our code, but also our processes, creating flowcharts, ERDs, and updating any database definitions. And all of that is very important when we want to move into the agentic era. So before we can create any more agents, it's important to have proper updated documentation and data so that the AI tools can work off of something. You have to be able to document your process as well so that the AI agents will know, what they're supposed to do and to have those processes in place.
Just a quick time check and checking in. I just wanted to share that we probably need to wrap up, but I think this has been super interesting. Was there maybe one or two last things you wanted to share before we wrap up?
I think that's it. This was the last slide.
Cool.
Last little bullet point was just on agents, but we already spoke about that. Thank you.
Well, Kevin, thanks for sharing about all the internal programming that you're doing to help promote AI usage. And Harminder, thanks for sharing the Salesforce use case. Super interesting. I think for those of the organizations that are using Salesforce particularly, that's really, really helpful. And I'm sure you're available for questions if needed offline. We can share emails if that's helpful. But thanks everybody for joining us. And we did record this, by the way, so we'll be sharing this through our social media. I love all the cheering. A lot of fans you guys have. It's pretty amazing. So, but we'll be sharing this video. And of course, as we mentioned, next week we have our AI 301 training. Hope you can make it Thursday, Friday. And we have our hackathon happening in August, and lots of good happening around AI for good over the next few months. So just keep an eye out for all the updates. And otherwise, have a great weekend. Thanks again. Bye,
Thank
everybody.
you so much.